and welcome to another episode of FooBar. Today, I will answer one of the most asked questions: how to test step functions. I know, I love step functions and I have talked a lot in this channel about those. I have videos on getting started, on the new features and things like that, but I never addressed the elephant in the room. That is how to test them. Today is the day. And why today is the day? Well, because they announced something to make it easy to test, but let's get there. So if you don't know what step functions are, they are a way to create state machines to orchestrate your applications. They integrate with over 200 services inside AWS, and you can do direct calls. So I have a video explaining step functions, explaining the integrations, and also showing you how to do step functions with SAM. That is one of the native integrations that have SAM. So I will assume that you know all that because this is a long video and I don't want to get out of track. So when step functions announce the service integration, basically now you can integrate step functions directly without the need of having a Lambda function to over 200 services. You ask me a lot how I test these machines, and that's a fair question because I'm asking you now. You don't need to have Lambda to have the business logic, but then I'm giving you this Amazon state language that there is really not way to do kind of unit tests or to make sure that everything is working unless you are kind of running the state machine in an integration environment and making sure that all the paths are what you expect. And this is tedious and this is really not a good practice. Sure, integration tests are very important because you want to make sure that the integration between your state machine and the AWS services are working, that everything is good, but the state machine has some logic in it. It has conditionals, it has fail states, it has different paths, and you want to test those even before testing the integration to make sure that things are flowing. Also, you can do some manipulations in your state machine. You can manipulate the data that you receive from a service or things like that. And you also want to test that. You don't want to test that in the integration test because that's not part of the integration test. The integration test is to test the integration with the service, not the business logic that is in the state machine. I don't know if you get it. But until a few weeks ago, we didn't have a way to do that. Basically, everybody was just launching these state machines and testing them manually. Today, they launched a new capability that is the mocked service integrations. And this allows us to do testing in our state machines locally. I'm not a fan of local testing when it means that we need to bring the cloud into our computers. But I'm a fan of local testing when it means that we can locally test the business logic fast and without really iterating and redeploying everything. So this mock service integration is a capability that allows us to mock the integrations against the AWS services, so we can mock the responses, so we can test that the business logic of the state machine is what we want. We can go through all the different cases, we can test all the different paths, we can test that the transformations that we are doing in our manipulations of JSON or things like that inside the state machine are working. And then when everything is working and we know that the state machine is good, then we can move to test the integration. Basically, this whole testing is a local test using the Docker image from step functions and a new file called the mocked configuration file where you are going to define your test cases. So in this video, I want to walk you through one configuration that I did for one project that I already have built. And then I want to show you how you can run this. I'm pretty sure better ideas and more automated ideas will come as time passes, but I don't want to wait for a long time to show you this because I imagine that the moment you start realizing how powerful is this, you're going to get great ideas on how to automate it as much as possible. So before going into the code, I hope you like this video because this is very cool functionality and you asked for it. So give it a like. let's go to the screen and see the code and all those things. So the project I'm going to be using is an example I did for the Step Functions SDK integration. So if you have not seen that video on how I built this state machine, you can find it in the description box. I leave it there. But basically, this is a step function that doesn't have any lambda, and it has many states that grabs a file from S3, transcribe it, and then translate it into Spanish. It's using a lot of these AWS services that has a nice API, so I can have a flow end-to-end and show you something. So we are going to write tests for this. So I'm going to clone this repo, and I already have it in my machine, and I can show you a little bit. So in the template YAML, we are not going to touch anything. Basically, we are not touching the application itself. We are just going to create tests over it. So there you can see the state machine, and you can see where the state machine is located. That is in the state machine folder. So there you can see the state machine. If you have the AWS Toolkit extension for Visual Studio Code, you can draw it, and you can see the different states and how they're behaving. So we are getting the video from an S3 file, we are copying it in our own bucket. Then we are going to start a transcription job. This is asynchronous, so we are going to wait for a while, in this case it's 20 seconds at a time, to make sure that the transcription job is done. Then we are going to get the transcription, and then we are going to translate it. So that's kind of it. So when we have that, most of these different states are tasks, and they are calling different integrations. So you can see there the resources, the type is a task, and then the resource is some kind of SDK integration. So those are the ones we want to mock. We want to mock the responses of these, of calling these APIs. So for that, I created the mock config file, and this is the file that you need to create with all your test cases. So this is something you need to create, and you need to create it with the format that I'm going to explain you here, but I'm going to leave you the link to the documentation so you know how to create it. So this file has a special structure. The first part is the state machines. You can have multiple state machines within one mock configuration file. So here I call local testing, and you will need that exact name later on when you are creating the state machine, but wait for it. So this name is important. Then we have the test cases. So for each state machine, you will have different test cases. In this example, I created two, the happy path and then an error when the file is not found. You can have as many as you want, and this is up to you, how many you need, how many you want. But for this example, I wanted to have two. So you can see the happy path here, and the happy path has multiple different mocked integrations. So you can see the get sample video. It has the mock success get sample video. And here the name is important. The name of the state needs to match in the mock config file and in the state machine, so it knows how to replace it. So this is something important when you are building this file. And then you create these mocks. And these mocks are in the second part of the document, in the part that is called mock responses. And you can reutilize it between your state machines and between your test cases. So that's why they're in a different part. And here we can have success or we can have failure. So we can start looking a little bit on the success, and they all have more or less the similar structure. So you will see that there is the 0, and this is the amount of retries. So if you have 0, every time this machine is invoked, it will return the same. If you have, for example, if you want to return, if you have some kind of loop or retry, you might have a different response for the 0, for the first iteration or for the second one. So maybe you want to give an error and you're trying a retry. So you want to try that logic, that maybe you retry 3 times and maybe you do an error the first 2 times, and then in the third time you do a success. And you can do that with these numbers. So that's something you have in mind. Then you have the return, and here is what the integration returns. So this is not the input or the output of the state, is the integration to that service. So if we're calling a Lambda function, we need to have here what the Lambda function returns. In this case, we are calling the S3 copy API. So we need to have here what the S3 copy API returns. And this is the tricky part, in my opinion, because, well, I mentioned it when we talk about the integrations, that there is not really a clear documentation on how to write this. There is no standardized. So you need to go into each of the service and get this. So as you build the request when you are writing the state machine task, you need to know what is the response when you're writing the integration, the mocked integrations. So it's the same documentation page. So for example, in the case of this one, you will go to S3 API copy object or something like that, and it will show you what it will return. So it needs to be exact. But again, this is a mock, so if you're not using this data, it doesn't matter because nobody will know it. But because also one important thing to have in mind here is that the state machine is not here validating the right integration against these services. So if you're really not using this response, for example, in the case of the copy, I don't care. I could leave it blank. It doesn't matter because we are not testing that yet. So, but in some cases, we need to have the right output because we are doing some changes. So let's look at that in a second. Now let's look at the errors. So the errors are important to make the state machine fail, for example. In this case, we have the S3 copy that could not find the file. So I'm throwing an error on the first iteration. And here you put the error name as the one that the API shows, and the cause, it can be whatever, it doesn't matter, but it's something that you will get in your execution results. So here is not such bucket exception because it's the exception I want to throw, so that's great. So another way to find the right values for this integration is to execute the state machine. I know, it's cheating, but this is a way. So you can go to your state machine and you can see in the execution event history, you can see the output for each of the execution of this task, and there you can copy and paste that. That's one way. That's what I did for this example because I'm lazy. But you can see how to form those by the documentation as well. But the important things is, for example, in the case of the get transcription text mocked, for example, there we are getting a body back from the transcription. So we are getting the whole transcription. It will be in an S3 file object, and we are getting that. And in here, if you see, there is the body, and that's important. This one, we cannot leave it empty, because here we are testing that the state machine is working properly. If you look at the state, the get transcription text has a result selector where we are picking just what is inside the body. So in this case, if we will not have the body in our mocked, then it will fail. The test will fail. So these are things that we are testing. So we are testing this preparation of result selectors and selecting inside the responses of the API. So that's something that is quite cool, because until now we could not test it unless we run it against the services, and that was very slow. So now we look at the config file and we want to run this. The first thing to run this is you need to download the local step functions Docker image. I'll leave you the link in the documentation. It's just Docker image. You can get it as a jar as well. And you download it, you follow the instructions, and blah, blah, blah. After you have that, I'm going to do it with Docker. I will initialize my Docker image, and important thing here is that you need to mount that configuration file that you just created. So that's available in the Docker image. So when the state machine executes in this Docker image, it has the right kind of integration responses, the mock integrations. So that's what we are doing here. All these examples, all these lines of code are in the document, are in the GitHub repo, so you can go and check them there. So basically here we are just running the Docker machine in the port 8083, and we are mounting the mock config file. When that's running, it will start running. I don't have my AWS configuration created here. So in the case that I don't have a definition for one particular state in my mock configuration file, what will happen is that we'll run against the real service. But as I don't have that configuration, I don't have the AWS profile configured in this Docker machine, it will fail. So that's something to have in mind. So when you are doing this, if you want to run against real services, you need to have your account configured in that Docker. You can see there that I have some errors because of that. Then we have that Docker running in one terminal, and in another one, we create the state machine. So we are going to create the state machine locally. So you can see there that we are going to create the state machine pointing to the endpoint of the Docker image that we just launched. And we are passing the definition, that is this state machine that I showed you a while ago with the whole states. Then we need to give a name. And in this case, we are giving the name local testing. And this local testing name is important, needs to be exact the same name as the state machine that we have in the mock file. Then we need to pass a role, and this is a dummy role, so you can see there that it's just random, ARN, and well formatted, but dummy. So if we go to our mock file, you can see there the local testing. Good. Now we have the state machine ARN, that is the Amazon resource name for that particular state machine that we created. You can see that it has a dummy account name and it has the name that we just provided. That's great. So what we can do now is to start an execution. And what we are going to do is to start an execution again on that endpoint, and we will do it against the state machine that we just created. So that ARN that it returns, and we are going to put hashtag and the name of the test case. In this case, happy path test. So then it will run the test suite that is inside that mock file. So my machine takes a while because it has this wait for 20 seconds, so it takes at least 20 seconds. And then when that's ready, it returns you an execution ARN. So keep that one in mind because you will need it for the next command, that is the get execution history. So you pass the execution ARN, that's the one that you just got back, and then you will get all the events listed, all the task enter, exit, task schedule, blah, 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 exactly as you will see it in the AWS console when you're running against real services. So you will see everything there. And because this is a little bit hard to find if this, for example, machine executed correctly, we are going to use this filter way, that is the -- query, that we can pass some kind of filter to just get the states that we want. So in this execution, we are going to make sure that the execution succeeded. If it did, then we are certain that this test case went through. So we can see here that there is an event of the execution succeeded, so that's great, we are done. If we want to test the file missing, we do the same with a different endpoint. So to automate this in some way, what I did is I create a makefile. And here you can find all the commands, so that also works as a documentation, where you can find 3 different things in the makefile: make run, make create, and make history. In the make run, you can run the Docker image and mount the mock configuration file. In the make all, you will create the state machine and you will start the executions for the happy and for the file not find test cases. And then for the history, you are going to get the execution history of these both test cases and against some query to make sure that they are running correctly. So this is great. You can go and get all the commands, and you can use these commands again in your own examples to try it like I was trying it directly from the terminal. So if I run in, you stop the Docker command from the previous one and you start this make run, it will start the image again. Exactly the same, and it will mount that mock configuration file. It will complain that you don't have your account configured in that container. And then in a different terminal, you can do make all. That will create the state machine and start the execution. The execution takes 20 seconds, so it will take 20 seconds per execution. There are 2, so this takes a little, like 40 seconds thing. So don't panic. If you pick a different state machine, it will take shorter time if you don't have a wait in the middle. So yeah, that happens when you test with something, but I wanted to grab something that is already working, so I don't need to modify it, so you can see how it works. So you can see that the 2 state machines run, and there is the execution ARN. And then if I do make history, I can run those 2 history checks, and they are both using the query parameters. So one we are testing again the execution succeeded, and then the other one we are testing against the execution fail. I think is I don't remember what is the name of the, let's see, execution fail is the name of the type. So yeah. So that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like, don't forget, and check the code. It's in the GitHub repo, and I see you in another episode of FooBar. Ciao, ciao!